Hello, and welcome back to The Whole Tooth, a podcast all about sharks brought to you by the Save Our Seas Foundation and me, your host, Dr. Isla Hodgson. Every episode, I pitch one of your questions about sharks and their underwater habitat to a panel of marine experts. And today's question is one that we've been getting quite a lot recently, which is, should I swim with sharks? Now, this brings us into the world of shark tourism, and to help me answer this question, I've asked Nicki and Rich from Celtic Deep to join me. Now, Celtic Deep is an organisation based in the UK, which take people on incredible experiences out into the waters between Wales and Ireland. And they work with a huge diversity of wildlife, including the blue shark, and teach people how to encounter them responsibly in the wild. So I thought Nicki and Rich would be absolutely perfect to help me answer this question. Nicki and Rich are incredibly experienced at what they do and have worked extensively both under and above the waves with both marine life and people. Nicki is a freediving and scuba instructor and a safety diver for film and TV productions, and she has always tried to have a conservation angle to her diving. So she is also a core volunteer with Neptune's Army of Rubbish Cleaners, the longest running ghost fishing charity in the UK. Rich is also an accomplished diver, marine scientist, and the co-founder and director of the Maldives Whale Shark Programme. He has 12 years worth of experience in shark conservation and research. Together, Nicki and Rich created Celtic Deep to promote marine conservation in action and start researching the marine life on their own doorstep. I really enjoyed this episode, not only because I get to talk about my home turf, UK waters, but also because it's a very nuanced and balanced discussion on the shark tourism industry. We touch on so many important topics, including social media, the potential impacts of tourism on shark welfare and how we can avoid them, and changing perceptions about these incredible animals. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Hello guys, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Isla.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
So today we have a very interesting question to answer actually, which is, should I swim with sharks? Which brings a lot of questions about encountering sharks in the wild, about wildlife tourism, and about kind of like the ethics of that. But before we get our teeth sunk into this question, I want to talk about you guys first. So I just wondered if, I've already introduced you, but I just wondered if in your own words you could describe who you are and what is it that you do. So Nicki, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'm Nicki. I'm part of Celtic Deep with Rich, and alongside that I also work as a dive safety and camera assistant for wildlife documentary filmmaking.
And I'm Richard Rees. I am as the other half of Celtic Deep, and then when I'm not doing that, I'm also director of the Maldives Whale Shark Research Programme, which is a charity that founded back in 2006.
Awesome, and they're very cool hats to wear, I must say. My next question, given the amount of experience that you both now have in and under the water, it's probably quite a difficult one, which is, what is your most memorable experience in the oceans? So Rich, if we can start with yours.
Yeah, I found this one tough, but I came to one which was actually not in the water, but was the most awe-inspiring sight I think I had, that I always go back to as a memory. As an 18-year-old, I was on a sailing boat and it was at night, and we were actually between Ecuador on a sort of way to the Galapagos on a sailing boat, and this already sounds like a boast. I'm really sorry about that, but it was very cool. And I was hitchhiking on sailboats at the time. It was the dead of night, which basically meant I was terrified for 4 hours, thinking I was going to crash the boat. And suddenly there was this sort of massive ghostly glow that sort of came in under the boat and just sort of moved around the boat. And my first thought that I was losing my mind because I'd been up so late, and then so I got my mate to come up and have a look as well, just to try and sort of make sense of it all. And we were watching this massive like cloud of glowing things around, just moving around the boat. Suddenly it was just like this big black fin just sort of came up like higher than we were sat in the cockpit of the sailing boat right next to us, and just an orca came up right next to us, and it was moving through phosphorescence in the water.
That's incredible. That's like one of those moments where you're kind of like you said, I dreaming? Am I imagining this is happening?
Yeah. So yeah. But still on the surface, so there you are. I've left underwater for you, Nicki. You can.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Don't quite have an Ecuador Galapagos type situation.
But yeah, same question to you then, Nicki.
Yeah, like Rich, there's so many, and each one is special for so many different reasons. But probably one which was just a pinch myself moment. And it's what happens when you meet people all around the world, and it's this like dive family that comes together. So I met a friend that was a friend from Dahab, where I'd done my freediving training, and another girl that I'd worked with in Thailand. And they were both ended up working and living in Tromsø. She was a marine biologist, and he's a freediver who's into sort of adventuring. And I went to see them both. And basically went out in a tiny little rib. It was like a 3.5-4 meter rib, out into the fjords in Tromsø, basically to go swimming with orcas and humpbacks. And we ended up, it was in the winter, so we had about 4 hours of daylight, and we ended up finding like a little lagoon, shallow lagoon, sandy bottom, with a mother and a calf that stayed with us for those hours of sunlight and just swimming with us, curious, rolling, showing their bellies, just but totally accepting of us in their environment. And yeah, it was incredible few hours. And just the daylight when it is there in the wintertime in Norway is incredible. And the mountains just hitting the sea there is just insane. And to be accepted into the world by these two huge animals who are just as curious of you as you are of them, that's one that sticks in the memory. As does the drive home in the freezing cold when we were all like...
I feel like we're really betraying the sharks here, Nicki. Like we've let them down big time. We've gone with this like couple of whale stories.
Don't worry, they'll get plenty of space on the podcast. But yeah, that's such a special experience to have had. And I think as well, like, it's that mixture of experiences, isn't it, really? It's kind of like where you are, and sometimes you get these really magical like settings, and also the way the weather is and who you're with as well can make such a difference. That brings us on very nicely to Celtic Deep. So can you tell me a little bit about what Celtic Deep is and how it actually came to be?
If I had to sort of nutshell Celtic Deep, the main elements are that we're going offshore, whether that's be to sort of offshore islands or offshore into the Celtic Deep. And we're also very passionate about getting in the water as well. So they're the two things I'd say that sort of sum us up in terms of an experience. In terms of our approach, I think we're sort of really passionate about wildlife. Obviously, we're really passionate about free diving and just the experience of getting in the water. And I'm sure Nicki will talk to you more about that. But we're also really passionate about sort of research as well and conservation. So we're keen for Celtic Deep to have like a role in learning more about the animals that we're going at and the habitats that we're visiting, and also ultimately hopefully sharing our experiences and sharing through sort of outreach work that we can get people more invested in, both wanting to come out with us but also sort of wanting to protect those areas as well. So yeah, that's I guess where we're coming from, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Good nutshell.
Slightly bigger, more of a coconut, but
like your Instagram is just incredible. Like you've just got so many amazing pictures of these experiences that you have. So Nicki, do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of free diving aspect and sort of the things that you do with that?
Yeah, I don't know how, it's a tricky one. So the free diving side is in development because it's this thing which I'm sure we'll touch on later, which a lot of people are not acclimatized to the UK waters. And so getting people to the point where they're sort of understanding to wear the right protective clothing, and then what it means to be in cold water freediving as opposed to what it means to be in warm water freediving is an evolution. So I've started to do some courses for people at an introductory level, and that's the way I'd like to introduce people to it as something within this country, because it's freediving is such a thing that it's a progression for your mind and body. It's not something that can be learned and you get a ticket and you're an open water freediver, for example. It's not the same as scuba. It's something, your body is the tool rather than a piece of equipment.
Now, speaking of getting in the water, I'm going to start our deep dive into this week's question, which is, should I swim with sharks? And the reason I've asked you both on to help me answer this one is because not only do you take people in the ocean, but you also take them swimming with blue sharks, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But first, I thought an interesting place to start was actually the roots of this question, because we've been getting it asked more and more as we, ramp up to summer. And I just wanted to know if you guys had noticed that people are perhaps more interested in having these sorts of in-water experiences with sharks. And if so, why do you think that is?
As a whole, I think it's been a sort of a new, you could say that it's kind of a new thing where we are, and the response to it's been overwhelmingly sort of positive, and I think people are just really excited. So for us, once it got out there, once some of like Nicki's pictures were out there, the sort of the equivalent to the phone just kept ringing, and we've been sort of booked up quite quickly, and it's been an amazing response.
You mentioned social media there. Do you think that's had quite a big role in making people more aware of these experiences and perhaps wanting to do them more?
Yeah, I mean, yes, certainly it has from our side, and I think it's had both really positive outcomes and also some that are potentially not so positive. So, I think the obviously positive messages are sort of good codes of conduct in the water with animals, respect for the animals, promoting protection of the animals. And then there's some other ones where it's a bit more kind of dodgy ground about maybe the message isn't right, or I think it's kind of making it look like, oh, you can just go in and pet a shark, which is not the message that we want to be getting across.
Yeah, I think we all have to be quite careful about how we sort of portray our experiences with wildlife, and I think that's whether that's as a tour operator or as a tourist. Yeah, the easiest way to sell a trip is to just put like amazing photos of blue sharks interacting with us, and probably the ones where they sort of come close to the camera, almost appear to like come at you almost. They're probably the ones that are going to get more of a response and things like that. And as Nicki mentioned, like sure, yeah, if you're going to start hanging on to a shark or whatever, then yeah, it looks like sort of shocking, and it gets liked, it gets shared. But I think sort of that sort of like sensationalist view of sharks can be, whether you were doing it to sort of, promote shark conservation or not, it's just the sensationalism around sharks isn't good. I think we need to sort of bring it down a notch. We need to sort of like, these are animals that just need a bit more sort of reverence and respect in terms of how we approach them. When we're posting stuff, what we do try to do for posting stuff about sort of shark interactions is also just, or any wildlife interaction, is if there's code of conducts that are either exist or that we follow, then we put those out there next to the photo, because hopefully then it's always sort of reinforcing this idea that there's a certain way to go about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social media can be such a double-edged sword in that, on the one hand you've got the really positive influence of people becoming more aware of sharks, but on the other hand you've got to be really careful that not everybody thinks that they can just hop in the water and hang on to a shark's fin. So that brings us on kind of really nicely to these experiences, actually encountering sharks in the water. So I wanted to ask you first a little bit about the blue shark itself, and You know, what is its behaviour like, and why do they come to UK waters?
Okay, well, the blue sharks are a very migratory species, so they'll basically follow the whole Gulf Stream along. They'll come up to us when the waters are warm enough, so from 12 degrees and above is when we'll start to see them. Where we are in Pembrokeshire, we're mainly seeing females, which is quite interesting. Again, sort of we don't know enough about why we're just seeing the females around us at the moment, but so we're getting, the females are slightly bigger than the males, so we're getting sharks of about 2 to 2.5 meters sometimes, and then smaller, and they'll have these incredible mating scars. I think it was about mid-July, wasn't it, Rich, when we were seeing a lot with the mating scars. They're coming to us essentially following the food trail, so the kind of fish that they're feeding on, herring, scad, squid, all that kind of stuff is in the water.
And what actually does a shark swim look like? You know, what is the process of getting people in the water with these animals?
Okay, well, we head out to the deep, which takes us about roughly 2 hours. And then once we get to our marker, which is, we've got the deep is actually not that deep, it's actually only 100 metres deep, but it's this area of upwelling, nutritional upwelling, which is why it sort of is where we will find the sharks. And we stop the boat at that point, so the engine's off, so we're just floating platform, and then we start to put some chum in the water, and this is just to create a scent trail. It's just sort of the promise of a feed. It's not, we're not putting food in the water when we're there, but it brings the sharks to the boat. Obviously there's issues around chumming, habituation, all this kind of stuff. We're very careful to not sort of go to the same marker every time. We're not feeding the sharks when they're coming in. We're sort of keen to avoid any kind of habituation with them at all. But once we get there, it's a waiting game basically. So we'll sit and we'll drift with the currents, and then that will mean that the scent will be out in the direction of the drift behind us. And then it could be anything from the moment we stop the boat to 20 minutes before we leave for the day that we get the sharks coming in. And the sharks that tend to come in faster are the poor beagles, because they are used to sort of knowing about fishing boats, so that they're quite attracted to the engine noise. So sometimes they'll be there instantly, but they're a little bit shyer. So we've never successfully really got in the water with a poor beagle. They'll sort of stay around below us, and then they'll be very skitty and go off. And they're an incredible little shark. They're like a little bulldog, mini great white kind of thing.
That's a great way of describing them, actually. Like a bulldog of the shark world.
Yeah. But they're very, very shy, so they really don't sort of stick around for us. But then the blues are another. They're so intensely curious, and they'll just come in and they'll stay around. So when we get the sharks, we sort of wait on the boat and see how comfortable they are with us. And then either Rich or myself will slip into the water to sort of very, very quietly go in. And then we'll see how comfortable they are. Once we see that they're staying, then we'll get clients in. And we take maximum of 4 people in with one guide each time. And it's a very controlled situation. So we have a rope off the back of the boat with a buoy on it. If we've got any kind of strength of current or anything, we don't let people let go of the rope. So everybody's just there in the water, face in the water in a vertical position, being able to watch the sharks circling around them. If we've got a little bit more slack water and it's benign enough to allow people to swim off the rope a bit, we allow them to do that, but it's controlled within a small amount of people within the water at any time. And then there's always either Rich or myself in the water with the other one of us on the boat as a spotter. And the role of the spotter is to not only be able to tell the people on the boat, wow, look here, this is another shark coming in, but it's also sometimes we get passing cetaceans. And if you're lucky enough to be in the water when we've got a passing cetacean, sometime last year we got incredibly lucky with these pods of dolphins came through the middle of us while we had sharks. So that allows the spotter on the boat will allow people to say, look in that direction, they're coming in. Obviously we don't jump in with cetaceans, but if we're already in the water and they come through, it would be more of a disturbance if suddenly everybody was getting out. So we just stay very, very passive at all times in the water. Obviously no touching, no chasing, no nothing. We're just completely passive there to watch. And that's the way we go about it.
Wow, okay, so those experiences sound absolutely incredible. And I am ashamed to say that I live in the UK and I have never seen a blue shark underwater, so I would absolutely love to have that experience. But yeah, you raised some really interesting points there about how we can encounter sharks in a way that minimizes disturbance on them. And so that kind of really brings me on to my next talking point, which is what the negative impacts can be on the sharks themselves, of these kinds of experiences. And, why do we need to be so conscious of these impacts?
I think the thing to remember is that sharks don't do anything just for the hell of it. They sort of, every single behavior a shark is carrying out at any point is really important to it. So I think what you've got to do as much as possible is minimize your impact on that. So, for example, if you were to touch a shark, the almost certain response from most shark species is that they will sort of evade your touch. So they will sort of try and escape that situation. They don't sort of necessarily, well, we don't know it's for sure how they perceive us, but it certainly, by reaching out to them, we're sort of like a threat on some level, and they're going to take action. Everything from sort of how a shark uses, energy wise, anything like that is going to be affected. So we're going to essentially stopping a shark doing what it needs to do. And that doesn't sound like the biggest deal, but actually it's sort of, if that's something that happens on a regular basis, particularly in areas where perhaps they aggregate or they gather for a particular reason, that can actually have quite a catastrophic effect across a sort of a population or subpopulation of sharks. So we need to be really careful about that. And, the other one that Nicki touched upon before with sharks, and we've tried to be sort of really open with this, that we've sort of, it is nuanced, but, that sharks, I think it's pretty well documented, but basically there's a couple of issues that come around sort of feeding sharks or sort of chumming as well, potentially. If you're doing it in the same place and time regularly, then you can develop sort of habits in sharks where they're attracted to a certain feeding opportunity, or what they perceive as a feeding opportunity. And if they are rewarded then, and if it does happen on a regular basis, then it can actually change their behavior, and they can become sort of reliant on that source of food, or it can interrupt their normal foraging behavior. And we call that sort of habituation, which is something that can be very damaging. I think, some examples, for example, would be perhaps in the Philippines, where you have whale shark feeding events, and there's quite a lot of controversy around that, because from a research point of view and the scientist point of view, that they feel like it is actually having quite an impact on the sharks.
So we already touched on this briefly, but I just wanted to pick up on that last point that you made, because it's really interesting. So how can we minimize our impacts on sharks in the water, especially as, there are some good sides to tourism. So, sometimes we do need it, but how can we minimize those impacts that you've just described?
What we try and do is we are chumming for sharks. And the reason we do that is because with an oceanic species or pelagic species like the blue shark, the chances of you jumping in the water in the Celtic Deep and bumping into one, incredibly low. You do have to sort of basically use their incredible senses and their sort of instincts for sort of seeking out feeding opportunities in the open ocean to bring them in close to you, and that's why we use the scent trail. You're talking about a sort of highly mobile species that, and they are quite sort of, they're sort of numerous. The the chances of us bumping into the same blue shark on any given day, the same one again is probably pretty low. But we, at the same time, we're not sort of resting on our laurels on that. So we are doing sort of photo identification with the fins of the blue sharks, to see whether we are seeing the same individuals again. And we're also, as Nicki says, so we're not going out at the same times. We're not going out on a day-to-day basis, on a regular day-to-day basis. We're not going to the same spots. So really, we're trying to minimise that opportunity or that possibility of habituation of the sharks. And the other thing then is that we don't feed the sharks, so we certainly don't take any food into the water with us, or and the reason we don't do that and is because of association, which is the other sort of issue that comes around sort of our interactions with sharks potentially, and that's sort of sharks associating humans with food, and that being a problem with that. So they're the sort of the things that the measures we take, I guess.
Yeah, and how about the other way around? Because I've been talking a lot about minimising our disturbance to the sharks themselves, but there's also another party in the water as well. There's obviously the people involved, and they are encountering a wild animal. So how do you teach people to act around sharks in the water, and treat them with the respect that they deserve, but at the same time, manage themselves and manage their own behaviour?
So we keep people very passive in the water, like I said, in a sort of vertical position, but head in the water. And we ask them sort of head in the water and not out of the water for more than 5 seconds at any time. And like I said, either Rich or I are in the water with them, observing what the sharks are doing and observing any change in behaviour. Sharks are not only curious, but also they're attracted to the electromagnetic fields from, say, cameras and things like this. So often they'll come and bump the dome of somebody's camera, or if it's a tiny little camera like a GoPro, obviously they're coming right in. But that's fine. We just tell people, you can put your fins in between yourself and the shark, or you can use the dome of the camera, just have that there in front of you, the shark will bump it and then move away. If we notice any kind of agitation in the water, say sometimes if there's a lot of sharks around us and one of the bigger ones might start to get a little bit more agitated, then all we'd say is, okay, everybody just out, and we'll sit it out for a little bit, and then either Rich or I will go back in and just sort of see, and it's fine. It'll just tend to be that whole thing, as Rich mentioned, they'll be thinking, oh, what are these guys in here for? Are they after our fish? So, and one shark might just be a little bit more territorial, so it's just a case of letting that all calm down, showing we're not there as a threat, and then it's all okay to be back in there again. No splashing as well, so we give people weight belts to just keep their feet in under the water. So as I said, when we slip in, it's literally a slip without a splash, and then you're on the line and you're just not kicking, you're just vertical in the water, just watching, and then you can turn and sort of watch them move around you. They're generally sort of slink around your feet. So it's just about, which ties back to freediving, minimal movement, conserve all your energy, and don't create any kind of waves in their environment. Yeah,
absolutely. Your body language is so important, not just when you're interacting with sharks, but when you're interacting with, all manners of wildlife. So I think that's such an important point. But we've talked quite a lot about the sort of potentially negative sides of tourism, but there are some really big positives to it as well. And one that you mentioned before, Rich, was actually increasing public awareness around sharks and changing people's perceptions about sharks. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Because, sharks typically have quite a bad rep in the media. A lot of people are actually afraid of sharks. So I just kind of I was just wondering if, where does that fear come from? And, do you think it's founded in anything? And also lastly, how important is it, or what is the potential of shark tourism to actually, change public perception?
Where does it come from? I think it's probably, to a large degree, I think it is about sort of that fear of the unknown. Largely it's about feeling, being in water is something that sort of makes people feel uncomfortable a lot of the time, particularly if you can't see what's below you. And I think sort of
sharks, and that's what sort of Spielberg, George was always going to come into this conversation, but that's what he played upon quite brilliantly, and I think it's sort of it is a rational fear on some level. It's these are predators in the water. We should have respect for them. We feel that on some level, as soon as I get in that water, everything under that water is just going to turn around and go, Rich is here, I need to go. Right, I'm after him, and it's like, well, not really, no. Like, these things have managed for millions of years without us dropping into the water every now and again. We are not remotely on the sort of like their radar in terms of like a food source. We need to sort of just reset this sort of idea that we're passionate about free diving, but we're more passionate about getting people in the water to see. So call it snorkeling. Like it's really about getting people to look under the water and see what's there for their own eyes. And and then it's amazing how it melts away that fear.
Yeah, totally. I think that's one of probably the best things about being an in-water guide, is actually seeing people in real time sort of lose that fear and develop confidence in the water, but also, develop such a huge respect for the animals that live in the oceans. It's a really, really special thing. But yeah, so I think basically what the theme of this whole episode is that it's not a straightforward answer. So, I think a lot of people at home maybe think the question, should I swim with sharks, is quite a simple one, maybe a yes or no answer, or in actual fact, it's really, really nuanced. And there's lots and lots of different facets to it and different elements to consider. And one of the other positive things, alongside changing public perception of sharks, is also the opportunity to conduct things like research. So, for example, one of the things that we do with the Baskin sharks is, while we're in water with people, we actually try and take data on these animals. What size are they? What sex are they? Is there anything we can do to ID them? Because, as we've discussed on this podcast before, there's not a lot that we actually know about sharks themselves. So there's lots of different avenues to this conversation. It's a very nuanced thing.
We're to operate with if we're making money from taking people to see sharks, which is a sort of like a common resource, then I think we should be doing also something to contribute in terms of monitoring them as well, and from a research point of view. So I think that goes across the board. I think you should. We're a platform that can be used for research, which is really expensive to do if you're just trying to get like funding for a boat to go out as often as we are. So
yeah, definitely.
I think we've got to do that, and I think we're comfortable with it. We've taken that sort of balanced look at it and said, we're comfortable with this on the basis that sharks right now are in sort of kind of last chance saloon in many respects, and certainly our oceanic sharks, in the last 50 years have declined by 70% down to sort of overfishing. It's not down to shark tourism. It's not down to shark angling even. It's down to sort of massive scale overfishing of shark populations through industrial scale longliners and things like that. And we feel that the benefit that's needed right now, or the effect that we want to create that is needed right now, is a change in public perception of sharks, so that we're not as ambivalent around their demise, and that actually it is a sort of seen as a massive tragedy that we're in this position, that we need to act right now if we're going to turn things around. So from that respect, we have decided that it's more important at this point that people do sort of see a different side of sharks, and fall in love with them, and quick.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think but I do. We've always wanted to be sort of really transparent about it. That, it's not the perfect system either.
So I just wondered, for anybody who is, wanting to head out on a trip this summer or try and have some of those encounters or experiences, what types of things should they maybe look for in an operator if they are looking to go out with somebody?
First and foremost, I guess one of the telltale things could actually be the social media. So if you see the social media of a company and you see that there's people in there touching sharks, you can have a look at the way they're talking about their encounters, and if it's clearly that they're not even putting a guide in the water with you, or you can tell by the kind of equipment that the people in the water are wearing if somebody looks overweighted, or if it looks like there's any kind of harassment going on, then that's a big warning sign, I would say. I'd say that, then check out the company's website, have a look if they talk about codes of conduct, have a look at if they talk about conservation, if that appears to be something that they're interested in or not, or if it is just literally advertising, go on, jump in with the shark. I'd say be very wary if there's no conservation message behind what the company's trying to do, and no safety message.
Yeah, I think some sort of demonstration, I guess, that it's, there's no sort of guarantees that, that, and also that, that there's sort of the vulnerability of the target species then as well is acknowledged too, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really nice to sort of bring it round to, a slightly more positive aspect, in that, when people ask, should I swim with sharks, the reasons that you should swim with sharks are, really valuable. So things like, we don't know much about sharks, for example, and a lot of people don't have the opportunity to actually be in the water with them for most of the days of the season. So it's really good to actually have people in the water sort of seeing these animals, and a lot of times when we're seeing sort of mating behaviour for the first time, or, when we're experiencing new behaviours, it's because people have been out, maybe, as part of tourism, and are watching these animals all the time. So there is that really valuable aspect to it. But yeah, just talking about the question itself, I just kind of wanted to swing back to it and just do a quick summary. So, there's lots and lots of different sides to this question to take into account. Obviously we all work in the tourism industry, so our immediate answer would be, should I swim with sharks? Yes, because it's a brilliant experience and there's a lot to be gained from it. You're often supporting local companies and local operations, and you're also supporting shark conservation and research when it's done right. But there's a big but there, which is that we also need to be responsible and conscious of A, who we're going with, and B, how it's being done, to ensure that we minimise disturbance to the shark as much as possible. And also, I really liked your points about being, honest and transparent on social media about your experiences. Sometimes we just see a shadow and, that's enough. But it's just enough to be in the water with these amazing creatures and to see them in their natural habitat, and going about their daily business, which I think is really special. But is there anything else that you guys would like to add on that question, or we've covered quite a lot of ground there?
We don't really get the chance to, I suppose, talk about sort of some of our experiences and what we've learned from those. So I think, it's been great exercise as well. So thank you for the opportunity on that as well. And just wish you as well a great season now. Let's hope that the weather is kind, because I think one of the things I've got to say is like a comparison from the Maldives to the UK, and taking people out to see wildlife is like, my experience so far has been like everyone in the UK is just delighted to be out. And it is so. I suppose it's very maybe more so with COVID and all the rest of it. It's generally speaking, I think we're like some of the best like wildlife tourists, because our expectations are pretty low.
People always laugh at that, actually, when I've been to other countries, for example, and I've actually not been the guide, and I've been a tourist, and I'm just so happy to be there. And my final question is a question that we like to ask all of our guests on this podcast. And that is, if you could be any species of shark or ray, what would you be and why?
Oh, God.
Another difficult question, though.
Yeah. I don't know. For some reason, I'm going to say leopard shark. Just
Oh, nice.
Nice.
they're a bit like the blues in the way that they move is very elegant and sweet, and the way they sort of sit and sleep around on the reefs. I don't know. I can't give you a really good reason why I want to be one, but they are a lovely looking shark. They've always got a smile. They're one of those sharks that's got a permanent smile. Is the thing. And for some reason, just reminiscing about Koh Lanta, where I used to work, it just took me back to being in amongst the leopard sharks every day. It was one of the species I enjoyed interacting with the most.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a really good reason. Yeah, you said you didn't have a good reason. I think that's really good. Yeah, Rich, what would yours be?
It's got a lot of admiration for poor beagles. I just think I just love their attitude. They just arrive. They just seem like really sort of like impatient, and like they just come in, what, and then off they go. You know, sort of like I just like their attitude. They're just sort of like really, and they're also an amazing shark as well. You know, sort of capable of swimming in our waters, which get very cold and sort of can warm blood and all the rest of it. So they're pretty incredible predators. So I'm going to go porpoise. They're sort of underrepresented, I think.
Yeah, great choice. Yeah, I mean they do have a very particular type of attitude. Yeah, for sure, definitely. But yeah, that was my final question. So thank you so much for all the time that you've given me, and all the fantastic answers that you have given to us. And I think we've definitely covered all ground on the question, should I swim with sharks? So yeah, thank you so much, and best of luck for the season, guys.
Thank you very much, Isla.
So we've come to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the podcast. And a massive thank you to Nicki and Rich for coming on to chat to me all about shark tourism and so much more. You can follow their adventures on Instagram by heading to @CelticDeep, which is all one word, or you can head to www.celticdeep.org. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one, and leave us a nice little review on iTunes. This just helps more people to find us. And if you would like a question answered on the podcast, or you just want to say hi, please feel free to get in touch by emailing isla@saveourseas.com. And big thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation for supporting this podcast, and to David Knight, who provided our wonderful jingle. All right, thank you, and I'll see you next time.